They thought Africa could be bought with gifts, promises, and bribes. They thought presidents could be turned into gatekeepers, selling their nations piece by piece. They thought Israeli corporations would be untouchable, safe under the shadow of Tel Aviv and Washington. But then came one letter, one refusal, one leader who broke the script, and overnight, everything collapsed. Factories went silent, mining operations abandoned. Foreign executives boarded planes home, leaving half-signed contracts on the table. The world couldn't understand. Was this isolation? Was this chaos? Was this the beginning of a collapse? Headlines screamed. Stock markets shook. Netanyahu sat, stunned in disbelief, because what happened in Ouagadougou was not just the decision of one man. It was the awakening of an entire continent. And here's the truth. This isn't the end of business in Africa. It's the end of exploitation in Africa. The real story is only just beginning. For decades, Israeli companies operated in Africa in ways the average citizen never knew. They were visible in construction, in telecommunications, in mining, even in agriculture. Behind the glossy promises of partnership lay layers of silent exploitation. They came with friendly speeches about cooperation. They came bearing brochures filled with slogans of progress. But in the shadows, the contracts told a darker story. These deals were not made in public squares or open parliaments. They were written in quiet hotel rooms. They were signed behind closed doors in government ministries. And always, at the center of these agreements, were clauses that tilted the balance of wealth away from Africa and toward foreign shareholders. Gold was lifted from the ground, while communities nearby still lacked clean drinking water. Fields produced cash crops for export, while local families struggled to feed their children. Tech companies claimed to connect Africa, but charged rates so high that the poor remained excluded from the digital world. On paper, everything looked like progress. In reality, the continent watched billions of dollars drain away year after year, and every time people asked questions, the same answer came from officials. Don't worry. Foreign investment is good for us. These companies are our partners. But in the quiet of rural villages and crowded city streets, people knew it wasn't true. The signs of exploitation were everywhere you looked: roads unfinished, wages unpaid, promises broken. Then came the bribes. Leaked documents proved that envelopes of cash, offshore accounts, and foreign bank deposits were used to keep local leaders loyal to these contracts. In some cases, promises of political protection were added into the bargain. We will support you internationally if you protect our business nationally. Israel believed it had perfected the formula. Africa was not treated as an equal. It was treated as a marketplace, as a farm, as a supplier for foreign hunger. But under the surface, something was changing. The anger was quietly growing. A new generation was paying attention. Students exchanged research about exploitation online. Journalists uncovered evidence of corruption. Workers complained loudly about unfair wages. And then there came Ibrahim Traoré. At only his mid-30s, he represented something completely different. Young, fearless, and unbought. His speeches refused the language of submission. His face reminded the continent of the courage of Sankara. And soon, the story that seemed impossible, defying Israeli corporations, was set into motion. The day the official order was signed, everything froze. Mining executives' phones buzzed with messages they thought were jokes. Operations suspended. Licenses revoked. Assets under review. Agribusiness managers sent frantic calls to Tel Aviv asking for instructions. Stockbrokers watched numbers plummet on their screens as billions were wiped out in minutes. Western newspapers described it with alarm. Panic in Africa's markets. Risk of instability. Leaders playing with fire. But on the ground, the feeling was very different. There was no chaos in the streets. There was no panic in the villages. Instead, there was an unusual calm, a feeling that at last someone had spoken aloud what people had whispered for generations. And then something shocking happened. The prediction of collapse never came true. Life continued. People went to work. Farmers tended their fields, students sat in classrooms, businesses reopened. The economy did not implode. The fear campaign proved hollow. Investors were stunned. They had assumed that without foreign companies, African economies would crumble instantly. Instead, new local businesses stepped in to fill the gap. Regional partners began offering alternative trade routes. For the first time in decades, the balance of power flipped. Israel looked for support in the Western alliance. But even there, cracks appeared. Some American and European watchdogs admitted the truth quietly. Africa had been exploited, and this was bound to happen sooner or later. This was not isolation. It was self-respect, and while business giants panicked, ordinary people celebrated. In Ouagadougou, market stalls filled with smiling vendors. In Bamako, songs echoed about resistance. In Accra and Lagos, social media exploded with messages of pride. Africa has finally stood up. Israel was prepared to deal with one man. They were never prepared to face 1 billion people standing behind him. The ripple spread faster than anyone could track. First, regional alliances. Governments across West Africa began reviewing contracts with suspiciously familiar terms. In East Africa, unions demanded wage reforms. In Southern Africa, students marched with banners supporting Traore. Suddenly, what was once viewed as reckless began to appear visionary. Civil society groups revealed damning evidence. Millions in foreign aid were actually disguised payments protecting business monopolies. Reports showed entire sections of government budgets quietly written in Tel Aviv to secure profits back home. The exposure embarrassed leaders who had long hidden behind the excuse of development. Stock markets wobbled across the continent and beyond. Israeli-linked businesses saw their shares plunge, but soon something unexpected followed: stability. Analysts realized that transparent deals, even when stricter, actually reduced risk. Fair contracts meant predictability. Predictability reduces corruption, and the reduction of corruption meant stronger stability. For a continent often described as unstable, this was revolutionary. Investors began whispering not about retreat, but about adaptation. Maybe the future of Africa isn't exploitation. Maybe partnership is more profitable. But the most powerful transformation did not begin in government ministries or boardrooms. It began in the streets, in the classrooms, in the studios, and in the minds of Africa's youth. Nearly 70% of the continent is under the age of 30. For years, foreign powers treated this massive young population as a burden, calling it a challenge, even a crisis. But what outsiders never understood is that this youth is Africa's greatest strength. And when Traore stood up to exploitation, it was like striking a match in a room filled with firewood. Young Africans saw in Traore something they had been waiting for all their lives: a leader who spoke their language of courage, a leader who was not apologetic about being African, a leader who was young enough to represent their frustrations and bold enough to represent their dreams. And the moment they heard his decision to remove Israeli corporations that refused fair play, young Africans felt released. The chains in their minds snapped. If he could do it at the top, they could do it on the ground. In Nairobi, university students who had been struggling with overpriced internet packages began building small local companies that provided cheap community Wi-Fi. Their goal was not to become the next Silicon Valley clone. Their goal was to connect their neighbors, one community at a time. That is how empowerment begins, not with billion-dollar foreign investment, but with dignity and local innovation. In Lagos, a group of young engineers created a payment app using local languages as the interface. They understood that millions of Africans had been excluded from digital finance because the platforms available treated English or French as the only gateway to progress. By rooting their app in African languages, they not only included the forgotten, they proved that innovation could reflect identity. In Dakar, fashion designers turned ancestral fabrics into bold urban styles and blasted them across global runways. No longer were African designers begging for foreigners to accept African style as exotic. Instead, they declared it mainstream, a source of global inspiration. African youth were saying clearly, we are not just consumers of the world's culture, we are producers of our own. In Addis Ababa, musicians mixed ancient rhythms with electronic beats, creating sounds that spread across TikTok and Spotify, carrying pride with every beat. These young voices did not ask permission from London or New York to define their music. They did not need approval from Paris or Los Angeles. They knew they were global already, as long as they believed in their roots. And in small villages far away from the flashy headlines, farmers' sons and daughters began experimenting with new techniques to reduce waste, share harvests, and manage land more sustainably. They understood something foreign corporations refused to accept, that food security and dignity began at home, not in international markets. This is the real revolution, not guns, not bullets, not tanks, but courage in classrooms, in markets, in studios, in labs, in farms. A silent roar rising everywhere at once. For decades, foreign institutions placed African youth in a box. You need foreign investment to succeed. You must copy Western systems to innovate. You cannot grow on your own. But when one leader stood up and said no more, that box exploded. And the realization spread. If we are 70% of the population, then we are 100% of the future. Nothing moves without us. The chain reaction unfolded daily. Startups registered at record speed across multiple countries. Local crowdfunding platforms gained power as investors realized local money pooled together could grow into global power. Art galleries opened to showcase African identity rather than imported styles. Student unions turned into movements for accountability, transparency, and reform. What outsiders mislabel as populism is in fact the rediscovery of pride. What they call nationalism is the rebirth of dignity. The youth no longer look outward for validation. They look inward for strength. African identity, once seen as a weakness, is now becoming the foundation of innovation. And every step forward, every new company, every artwork, every concert, every factory, every fashion show is sending the same thunderous message. We do not need to be invited to the global stage. We are already on it. The stage belongs to us. 2. The youth have understood something too many leaders ignored. Leaders can be bought, but people cannot. Presidents may sign contracts that betray futures, but the people themselves will not let their destiny be taken away. And now, with the rise of social media, with the power of ideas traveling instantly, there is no way to silence them. Every time an injustice is exposed, they unite, demand justice, and echo the same timeless cry, Africa will not be sold. This is not only a cultural revolution, it is an economic one. Every innovation, every song, every painting, every app is a strike against dependency. Where foreign corporations once filled a vacuum, now African solutions begin to rise. Dependency decreases, confidence increases, the effect multiplies. Generational change is not coming slowly, it is arriving now, it is loud, it is fearless, and it does not wait for permission. And so the story reaches its most powerful truth. This struggle was never about being anti-Israel. It was never about being anti-West. It was never about closing doors. It was always about opening the right doors. Doors that lead to dignity. The removal of exploitative businesses is not hatred. It is not revenge. It is clear. It is fair. It is a refusal to keep repeating the same broken script. Anyone who comes to Africa with respect, partnership, and fairness will find the door open. But anyone who comes to extract, to deceive, to buy silence, they will find the door shut no matter how powerful they believe they are. Traore's act was a spark, but the fire belongs to all Africans. From Ouagadougou to Johannesburg, from Kinshasa to Nairobi, the same heartbeat is echoing. We are equals, not subjects. We are partners, not servants. We are authors of our destiny, not actors in someone else's play. And this truth is shaking the foundations of global politics. Foreign governments can no longer plan their imperial strategies in secret. Foreign businesses can no longer write one-sided contracts without scrutiny. Every deal now faces the light of dignity. Every contract must face the eyes of the people it affects. The rules have changed forever. But here comes the real climax. The responsibility is not only for the leaders, it is for the people, for the worker in the mines who demands fair pay, for the mother who insists her children must not starve while minerals are exported, for the student who exposes corruption through research, for the entrepreneur who reinvests profits into communities instead of hiding them abroad, for the artist who paints truth on public walls, for the citizen who refuses silence, even when afraid. Together, these actions form the real shield of Africa. Those who once thought they could buy one African president now realize they are facing something much larger. 1 billion Africans who have risen together. That is not a challenge any empire can buy, threaten, or undermine. This is the ending foreign powers never predicted. They thought it was a game of one man. They were wrong. It became the movement of an entire generation. And so, let us be completely clear. Africa is not for sale. Africa was never for sale. And any hand that tries to turn it into merchandise will face the resistance of its people, leaders, youth, and future. Now the message turns to you, the listener, because this is not only about Traore, it is about you. Every story of change is incomplete without action. So ask yourself, are you a spectator or a participant? If you are moved by this story, do not keep it to yourself. Share it, spread it, speak it. If you believe in dignity, support it in your daily choices. Back local businesses, respect African entrepreneurs, refuse to stay silent in front of exploitation. If you are young, create. If you are older, protect. Wherever you buy, stand, act. Because this revolution will not succeed with one leader alone. It succeeds with all of us. Together, as 1 billion voices, as one heartbeat for justice, sovereignty, and dignity. Remember this truth. Revolutions collapse with violence and guns, but revolutions thrive with dignity and unity. Bullets are temporary. Ideas are permanent. Corruption destroys, transparency builds, silence betrays, truth liberates. This movement is not waiting for outsiders. It is creating a new Africa right now. And the world can either adapt, respect, and cooperate, or be left behind. So stand up, raise your voice, support the truth. Because the story of Traore is not just about Burkina Faso. It is about Africa. It is about sovereignty. It is about you. The revolution continues. Not tomorrow, not someday, but today. And this time, nothing can stop it. This is the message. Africa cannot be bought. Its people cannot be silenced, and its future cannot be stolen. But the fight does not end with leaders. It continues with you. If you believe in dignity, speak. About it. If you believe in justice, demand it. If you believe in independence, protect it. Do not scroll past. Do not stay quiet. Do not wait for someone else. Because silence is what kept exploitation alive for decades. But truth, spoken loud, spoken everywhere, is what ends it. So share this story, spread this fire, and stand with those who dare to defend sovereignty. Support Africans building their own future. Celebrate leaders who choose principle over bribes. Stand tall, speak clear, and act now. Because the world is listening, because the future is watching, and because this is not just Traoré's moment, it is our moment. The time for hesitation is over. Africa is rising, and your voice is part of that rise.